I'm Moana, 34 years old, standing in the Maldives watching sunset paint the ocean gold while my phone buzzes with angry messages from my family demanding to know where I am. They're furious I'm not home cooking Thanksgiving dinner like every year. 6 months ago, they went to Hawaii without me, claiming there wasn't enough room. Now I'm sipping champagne in a private villa they could never afford. Their betrayal taught me the most valuable lesson. Sometimes revenge tastes better than forgiveness. Before we dive into this journey, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you dealing with similar family dynamics? Hit that like button if you've ever felt excluded by the people who should love you most, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself. Trust me, what happens next will show you exactly why putting yourself first isn't selfish, it's necessary. Let's begin this incredible transformation together. Growing up as the middle child between my older brother Drake and younger sister Autumn, I learned early that love in the Montgomery family came with conditions I could never quite meet. My parents, Dale and Dorothy, had perfected the art of selective memory when it came to including me in family activities. At 8 years old, I watched from my grandmother's living room window as our family car pulled away for a Disney World vacation I'd been dreaming about for months. Tickets were just too expensive for everyone, sweetheart, my mother had explained, pressing a kiss to my forehead that felt more like a dismissal than affection. Years later, I'd find photo albums filled with images from that trip, empty seats on every ride mocking me through glossy prints. The pattern became my unwanted inheritance, passed down through every significant moment of my childhood like a twisted family heirloom. High school brought missed Broadway shows my siblings attended, concerts where my favorite bands played to an audience that included everyone but me, and sports championships where my absence went unnoticed amid the cheers. Each exclusion came wrapped in reasonable explanations that unraveled under scrutiny. We couldn't find another ticket, they'd say about events I'd later discover had plenty of available seats. You had that test to study for, they'd remind me about exams I'd already taken. Adulthood failed to break the cycle, instead reinforcing it with more sophisticated cruelty. At 25, I learned about Drake's destination wedding in Cancun through a save-the-date card that never arrived at my apartment. When I confronted him, he perfected our father's talent for gaslighting, insisting they were keeping things intimate with close family only. The Facebook albums that surfaced later told a different story, one populated with over 150 guests including cousins I'd forgotten existed and family friends, whose names my parents could barely remember. My absence had been so carefully orchestrated that table arrangements showed no gap where I should have been. 3 years later, Autumn's college graduation became another milestone I'd experience through social media rather than shared celebration. The Europe trip they'd planned to commemorate her achievement apparently didn't have space for a third adult, though Instagram stories revealed plenty of room in their luxury rental cars and five-star hotel suites. The deepest cut came when I discovered they'd used my carefully accumulated travel reward points for their flights, points I'd been saving for my own dream vacation that would never materialize because family always came first, even when family forgot I existed. Recent years brought escalating boldness to their exclusions, as if practice had made them perfect in the art of pretending I didn't belong. Last Christmas morning arrived with me standing on my parents' doorstep, arms full of carefully wrapped presents, only to find the living room floor already littered with torn wrapping paper and empty boxes. "Oh, Moana, we thought you said you'd be late," my mother offered weakly, not meeting my eyes as Drake played with his new smartwatch and autumn model designer boots I recognized from her wish list. They'd started and finished Christmas without me, reducing my presence to an awkward afterthought requiring reheated coffee and forced conversation about gifts already given and moments already shared. The spring brought another revelation when my cousin's Instagram story exposed the family cruise I hadn't known existed. 7 days through the Caribbean on a ship large enough to hold thousands, yet somehow too small to include me. When I confronted my mother, her excuses had evolved from creative fiction to lazy dismissal. "We assumed you were busy with work," she said, despite my having requested vacation dates from her just weeks before. The truth was simpler and crueler than any excuse because it required no explanation at all. They simply enjoyed themselves more without me there, a fact so fundamental to our family dynamic that questioning it seemed as pointless as asking why the sky was blue. The deception began in May with the innocent appearance of a family group chat notification on my phone. "Time to plan our small summer gathering," my mother had typed, followed by the kind of emojis she'd recently discovered and now overused with embarrassing enthusiasm. I responded immediately, offering to research venues, coordinate schedules, and handle the logistics that usually fell to me anyway when they remembered my existence. My messages hung in the digital void, marked as read but never acknowledged, like prayers to indifferent gods who had more important worshippers to consider. June arrived with suspicious whispers and abruptly ended phone calls whenever I entered a room. I caught my mother mid-conversation about flight arrangements, her voice dropping to guilty silence when she noticed me in the doorway. "Just handling some work travel for your father," she lied with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent decades perfecting the art. The deception might have held if Autumn hadn't inherited our family's inability to keep secrets from anyone except me. "I can't decide if I should pack more sundresses or casual clothes for the trip," she mused during a rare lunch together, catching herself too late as my eyebrows rose in question. "What trip?" I asked, watching her scramble for an explanation that would somehow exclude me from my own curiosity. The July 4th weekend arrived with fanfare everywhere except the Montgomery household. My traditional hosting duties, accumulated over years of being the dependable one, were suddenly unnecessary. "We've all got separate plans this year, honey," my mother informed me during a brief phone call that felt more like a corporate memo than a conversation between mother and daughter. The lie settled into my chest like a stone, heavy with the weight of every exclusion that preceded it. Still, I drove to their house on July 3rd, my father's birthday gift wrapped in the expensive paper my mother preferred, hoping maybe this year would be different. The empty driveway should have been my first clue, but denial is a powerful drug when mixed with desperate hope. Their neighbor, Harold, provided the truth my family couldn't be bothered to share. "Oh, they left for the airport yesterday morning," he mentioned casually while watering his petunias, unaware he was delivering news that would shatter what remained of my faith in blood bonds. "Quite excited about Hawaii, from what Dorothy was saying." "Surprised you're not with them, dear." I managed a smile that felt like breaking glass, mumbled something about work commitments, and fled to my car before the tears could betray 3 decades of practiced composure. Autumn's Instagram became my window into the vacation I should have been sharing, each post a fresh wound salted with hashtags like #FamilyFirst and #MakingMemories. The opening image showed them raising my ties on a Maui beach, 5 smiling faces where 6 should have been. My mother wore the sundress I'd helped her pick out last month, telling me she needed something nice for summer occasions. Drake's wife posed in jewelry I recognized from the birthday gift I'd given her, apparently perfect for tropical vacations I wasn't invited to join. Even my father, usually camera-shy, grinned broadly while wearing the Tommy Bahama shirt I'd bought him last Father's Day, finally finding an occasion special enough to debut it. The confrontation came in waves as I dialed each family member, desperate for an explanation that might salvage what we'd pretended was love. My mother answered on the 3rd ring, background noise of ocean waves mocking me through the speaker. "Moana, darling, this was such a last-minute decision," she began, the lie so transparent I could see through it across 3,000 miles. "We barely had time to pack, much less coordinate with everyone." The reservation screenshot I'd found through the vacation rental website told a different story, one where they'd booked a 6-bedroom oceanfront villa 3 months in advance, paying extra for the privilege of excluding me from paradise. Drake's response came via text, his cowardice matching his cruelty in perfect proportion. "There wasn't room at the resort," he typed, apparently forgetting I'd already seen the VRBO listing with enough bedrooms to host a small reunion and a great room larger than my entire apartment. When I sent him the screenshot, he switched tactics with sociopathic ease. "Look, you always complain about everything anyway. We wanted to actually enjoy ourselves for once." The accusation stung because it was designed to, crafted from years of watching which words would cut deepest and leave the ugliest scars. My father's voice carried exhaustion when he finally returned my call, though whether from tropical activities or maintaining lies, I couldn't tell. "Princess, we assumed you couldn't afford it," he said, using the childhood nickname that now felt like mockery. "Your mother mentioned you'd been stressed about money." I laughed then, bitter and sharp enough to cut, because I'd just received my largest bonus ever and they knew it. Or would have known it if they'd bothered to ask about my promotion, my life, or anything beyond what I could do for them. Autumn provided the final twist of the knife with her characteristic blend of selfishness and self-righteousness. "God, Moana, it's not that big a deal. Stop being so dramatic. We're allowed to take a trip without you." Her words held the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been excluded from anything that mattered, who'd grown up so secure in her belonging that my pain seemed like performance art rather than genuine anguish. She was right about one thing, though. They were absolutely allowed to vacation without me. And as I hung up the phone, staring at their beach photos through tears that finally came, I realized I was allowed to do the same. The 4th of July found me alone in my apartment, scrolling through an endless feed of family barbecues and fireworks, while mine built sandcastles 5 time zones away. Each notification felt like another small explosion, illuminating the stark reality of my isolation in brilliant, painful bursts. My coworkers had invited me to their celebrations, but I declined with manufactured excuses about family obligations, too ashamed to admit my family had obligations that specifically didn't include me. The irony wasn't lost on me as I ate takeout Chinese food straight from the container, watching fireworks through my window while my family watched them over the Pacific without me. Serena found me the following Monday in the office bathroom, shoulders shaking with sobs I'd held back all weekend. My best friend since our first day at Morrison Marketing had seen me through bad relationships and worse hangovers, but she'd never seen me broken quite like this. "Honey, what happened?" she asked, gathering me into a hug that felt more familial than anything I'd experienced with blood relatives. The story poured out between hiccups and tissues, 5 days of pain compressed into 15 minutes of ugly crying that probably violated several workplace policies about appropriate bathroom usage. "I need to show you something," Serena said after I'd finished, pulling out her phone with the determination of someone about to share difficult truth. The photos she scrolled through showed another family, another vacation, another empty space where someone should have been. 5 years, she said quietly, showing me image after image of her own family's trips to Italy, Greece, Japan, all documented without her presence. 5 years of being told there wasn't room, wasn't budget, wasn't time. Until I finally realized the only thing there wasn't was respect. Her revelation hit me like cold water, shocking in its clarity and terrible in its familiarity. Dr. Coleman's office had become my weekly refuge since the promotion my family never acknowledged had provided decent mental health coverage. The timbre of her voice always reminded me of warm honey, soothing even when delivering hard truths. "Let's make a list," she suggested during our emergency session that week, sliding a yellow legal pad across her mahogany desk. "Every exclusion you can remember. Not to dwell, but to witness." Sometimes we need to see patterns written down before we can accept what our hearts already know. The exercise seemed simple until the memories started flowing, each one demanding documentation like evidence in a case I was building against my own denial. By the time I finished writing, my hand cramped from gripping the pen and 10 pages bore witness to 3 decades of systematic emotional neglect. Birthday parties I learned about through thank you cards for gifts I never saw opened. Family reunions discovered through elderly relatives asking why I hadn't attended. Graduations, celebrations, holidays, and ordinary Sunday dinners that somehow never had a place set for me. The list revealed a truth more damning than any single exclusion because it showed intent stretched across years, deliberate choices made over and over to demonstrate exactly where I ranked in their priorities. "This isn't normal family dysfunction, Dr. Coleman said gently, reading through my catalog of exclusions with professional concern breaking through her usual neutrality. "This is scapegoating, Moana. You've been assigned a role in your family system, and that role is to be excluded. To be the one who gives but doesn't receive, who serves but isn't served, who loves but isn't loved back in equal measure. Her words should have hurt, but instead they felt like diagnosis after years of mysterious symptoms. Finally, someone had named the disease that had been slowly killing my spirit since childhood. August arrived with a notification that changed everything, though I didn't recognize it as deliverance at first. The email from HR seemed routine until I read the numbers attached to my performance bonus, digits that made me refresh the page 3 times to ensure I wasn't hallucinating. The promotion I'd worked towards for 3 years had come with compensation that reflected my value in a way my family never had. A week later, another email arrived from the estate lawyer handling my grandmother's will. She'd left me more than anyone expected, along with a note in her careful cursive, for my overlooked girl, who deserves to be seen. Use this to find your light. The convergence of financial freedom and emotional clarity created a perfect storm of possibility. For the first time in my life, I had both the means and the motive to rewrite my story. My family had assigned me a role, but I didn't have to keep playing it. They expected me to host Thanksgiving like I had for the past decade, cooking for 2 days to create a feast they'd devour while discussing vacations I hadn't been invited to join. The assumption sat in our group chat like an uninvited guest, growing more presumptuous with each day that passed without anyone actually asking if I'd host. Setting boundaries started small, like flexing muscles that had atrophied from disuse. When Drake texted asking for help with his kitchen renovation, I responded with a simple, "No, I'm not available." The period at the end of that sentence felt like a declaration of independence. His follow-up messages grew increasingly frustrated as I maintained my refusal, apparently shocked that his reliable source of free labor had suddenly developed self-respect. Autumn's request for a car loan met the same fate, her entitlement crashing against my newfound ability to prioritize my own needs over their wants. My parents noticed the shift during our monthly obligatory dinner, though they couldn't quite name what had changed. "You seem different," my mother observed, studying me across a table where I'd learned to make myself small. "Are you dating someone?" The assumption that only romantic love could account for my improved demeanor spoke volumes about how little they knew their daughter. I wasn't dating anyone. I was finally dating myself, taking my own needs seriously for the first time in 34 years. The reservation I'd made that night wasn't for 2, but it wasn't for 6 either. It was for exactly the number of people who deserved to be there, 1. The idea began as fantasy, the kind of elaborate daydream that sustains you through mundane afternoons and sleepless nights. What if, instead of cooking another unappreciated Thanksgiving dinner, I spent the holiday somewhere extraordinary? Somewhere my family would never think to look for me because they'd never imagine I deserved such luxury? The more I researched, the more the fantasy crystallized into possibility. Europe felt too predictable, the Caribbean too similar to their cruise I'd discovered through social media. I needed something that would make their Hawaii trip look like a budget weekend at a roadside motel. The Maldives emerged from my research like a siren song of crystalline water and pristine beaches. November marked the beginning of the dry season, with perfect weather and fewer tourists than peak months. Every travel blog I devoured painted pictures of overwater bungalows and private islands, experiences so removed from my family's concept of vacation that they might as well exist in different dimensions. The Waldorf Astoria at the Fushi appeared on my screen like destiny dressed in 5-star reviews and once-in-a-lifetime descriptors. Private island resort. Overwater villas with infinity pools. Personal butler service. The price made my breath catch, but my grandmother's voice echoed through doubt. "Find your light, overlooked girl." The numbers sprawled across my spreadsheet like a declaration of war against every budget vacation my family had taken without me. First-class Emirates flights cost more than their entire Hawaii trip, but the lie-flat seats and private suites promised something my family had never given me, space that was truly mine. The overwater villa commanded $3,500 per night, a figure that would make my fiscally conservative father choke on his generic brand coffee. 10 nights total, because if I was going to disappear, I intended to do it thoroughly. The seaplane transfer alone cost more than Autumn's monthly car payment, the one she couldn't afford but expected me to cover. I booked everything one evening while my family group chat discussed Thanksgiving logistics with the casual assumption of my participation. "Moana always does such a beautiful job," my mother typed, emojis attempting to soften expectation into compliment. "Can't wait for your famous stuffing," Autumn added, apparently forgetting she called it too dense last year. Drake's contribution came in the form of dietary restrictions for his wife, who'd suddenly developed gluten sensitivity that would require separate preparation of half the menu. Their messages accumulated like unpaid bills while I entered credit card information for experiences they couldn't imagine I deserved. The preparation phase required stealth I'd never needed before, though perhaps I'd been training for this my whole life. Every family gathering where I'd smiled through exclusion, every holiday where I'd pretended not to notice the gifts exchanged in my absence, every vacation photo I'd liked while sitting alone in my apartment, all of it had prepared me for this performance. When they asked about Thanksgiving plans, I responded with non-committal agreements and subject changes perfected over years of avoiding painful truths. Working on myself became my standard response, vague enough to discourage follow-up while technically honest about my intentions. My wardrobe underwent transformation as dramatic as my mindset. The practical clothes suited for serving others gave way to flowing dresses designed for beach dinners where I'd be the guest of honor at my own celebration. A designer swimsuit replaced the sensible one-piece I'd bought on sale because swimming in the Indian Ocean demanded better than clearance rack confidence. Every purchase felt like rebellion, each receipt a small victory against the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother asking who I thought I was to deserve such nice things. The photography equipment arrived in packages I had delivered to work, avoiding the possibility of family members noticing unusual purchases. If I was going to document my liberation, I intended to do it with the same attention to detail my family applied to recording their exclusive memories. A waterproof camera for snorkeling expeditions they'd never believe I'd taken. A tripod for solo shots that would prove I didn't need a full family to create a complete picture. Enough memory cards to capture every moment of the life I was about to begin living. Learning about Maldivian culture filled evenings that might have been spent responding to family demands. I studied basic Divahai phrases, researched local customs, and read about the delicate ecosystem I'd soon explore. The marine life guides particularly captured my attention, pages filled with creatures as beautiful and foreign as the self-respect I was cultivating. Whale sharks, manta rays, and sea turtles populated waters where I'd swim alone but not lonely, surrounded by life that didn't require blood relation to share space peacefully. The timing required careful orchestration to maximize impact while minimizing opportunities for interference. November 19th would mark my departure, giving me time to establish myself in paradise before the Thanksgiving reveal. My family's assumption that I'd host dinner as usual provided perfect cover, their entitlement becoming my enabler. I even bought a turkey, displaying it prominently during a video call where my mother critiqued my kitchen backsplash while confirming her attendance at Moana's traditional Thanksgiving feast. The bird would spoil in my empty refrigerator while I feasted on fresh seafood prepared by chefs who didn't expect me to do the dishes afterwards. Requesting vacation days required delicate navigation with my boss, though Sarah proved more understanding than blood relatives had ever been. Family issues, I explained, watching her expression soften with sympathy. I need to put some distance between us for the holidays. She approved the time immediately, adding extra days I hadn't requested with a knowing look that suggested her own family carried similar dysfunction. "Take all the time you need," she said, signing the form with a flourish. "Sometimes the best family time is the time you spend away from them." The final details clicked into place like tumblers in a lock opening to freedom. Airport parking reserved for extended stay. Houseplants delivered to Serena for safekeeping. Mail held at the post office to avoid accumulation that might prompt unwanted wellness checks. Each task completed brought me closer to a departure that felt less like escape and more like homecoming to a self I'd never been allowed to inhabit. The night before my flight, I laid out clothes for a journey my family would never understand, passport and tickets arranged like medals of honor earned through decades of thankless service finally ended. My phone buzzed with the family group chat's latest assumptions about menu preferences and arrival times. Drake wanted to know if I could pick up his in-laws from the airport, apparently forgetting I wasn't their personal shuttle service anymore. My mother reminded me about the good china, the silverware that needed polishing, the tablecloth that required ironing to her specific standards. Each message strengthened my resolve, their entitlement transforming from burden to motivation. In 12 hours, I'd be airborne while they discovered what happened when you took someone's presence for granted once too often. The turkey sat in my refrigerator like a prop in the final act of a play where I decided to rewrite my character's ending. The morning of November 19th arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes everything feel possible. My bags waited by the door like conspirators in the best kind of betrayal, while my family's group chat pinged with last-minute Thanksgiving coordination. Don't forget the cranberry sauce this year, my mother typed at 6 a.m., apparently unaware that forgetting would be impossible from 5,000 miles away. I responded with a thumbs-up emoji that would become infamous in Montgomery family lore, the digital equivalent of a resignation letter delivered without notice. The ride to the airport felt different from every journey I'd taken before, weighted with significance that had nothing to do with luggage. My driver made small talk about holiday plans, and for the first time in my life, I answered honestly. I'm spending Thanksgiving alone in the Maldives, I told him, watching his eyes widen in the rearview mirror. That sounds lonely, he ventured carefully. No, I corrected, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Lonely is cooking for people who vacation without you. This is freedom. He fell silent after that, but when we reached the departures terminal, he helped with my bags and wished me the kind of genuine happy holidays my family had forgotten how to mean. The Emirates' first-class lounge exceeded every expectation I'd allowed myself to harbor. A personal concierge checked me in with the kind of attention I'd craved from blood relatives, offering champagne that tasted like vindication with bubbles. I found a quiet corner with panoramic views of planes departing for destinations unknown and pulled out my phone for one last scroll through family messages. Autumn had added 17 items to the grocery list. Drake specified that his wife now required dairy-free options in addition to gluten-free. My father reminded me about his preference for dark meat, as if I hadn't been carving turkeys to his specifications for a decade. Boarding the plane felt like crossing into another dimension where Moana Montgomery wasn't anyone's afterthought. The flight attendant addressed me by name, showed me to a suite that could have fit my childhood bedroom, and demonstrated features I'd only seen in movies about people whose families probably included them in vacations. As the plane pushed back from the gate, I posted my first photo, manicured nails holding champagne against the backdrop of a first-class cabin. No caption yet. Let them wonder why I was flying somewhere when I should have been grocery shopping for their feast. 20,000 feet above the Atlantic, I crafted my revelation with the same attention to detail I'd once applied to Thanksgiving place settings. The photo showed my view from the suite, clouds painted gold by sunset, champagne and caviar service arranged artfully on marble tables that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Thankful for finally choosing myself, I typed, then sent it into the digital universe, where it would explode like perfectly timed fireworks. The satisfaction of hitting share rivaled any holiday meal I'd ever prepared, seasoned with 3 decades of accumulated resentment finally given permission to feast. The first call came before I'd finished my appetizer. Drake's name flashed on the screen with the insistence of someone unaccustomed to being ignored. I let it ring through to voicemail, then did the same for the next 15 attempts. My phone became a lightning storm of notifications, each buzz another family member discovering that reliable Moana had done something magnificently unreliable. Text messages accumulated like snowdrifts, ranging from confusion to concern to barely contained rage. Where are you? Gave way to "this isn't funny" before evolving into "how could you do this?" with remarkable efficiency. My mother's voicemail achieved new heights of maternal manipulation, her voice climbing octaves with each word. Moana Elizabeth Montgomery, I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but you need to come home right now. There are 40 pounds of turkey in my refrigerator and your father's entire family coming in 3 days. This is not how we raised you to behave. I listened to it twice, marveling at how she'd managed to make my first act of self-preservation sound like a felony. The irony of her invoking how they'd raised me while demonstrating exactly why I'd fled wasn't lost on me, though it might have been lost on her. The second wave of photos came as we flew over Europe, each image carefully curated to maximize impact. My suite converted into a bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. The shower that somehow existed at 35,000 feet. The menu featuring dishes I couldn't pronounce but would happily learn. I'd become my own documentary filmmaker, crafting a narrative where the overlooked middle child transformed into the protagonist of a story my family never thought I deserved to star in. Landing in Male 20 hours later felt like arriving at a life I'd ordered from a catalog of dreams I'd never dared browse before. The chaos of missed calls and unread messages existed in a phone I'd switched to airplane mode, creating a boundary more effective than any conversation about respect ever managed. The seaplane transfer agent greeted me with a warmth that didn't depend on shared DNA, whisking me through private terminals where other refugees from obligation prepared for their own escapes to paradise. The seaplane ride provided the perfect backdrop for my next revelation. Azure waters stretched endlessly below, while I captured footage of a journey my family would never take because it wasn't about them. The pilot pointed out dolphins racing alongside our wake, and I filmed them with tears streaming down my face, overwhelmed by beauty I'd almost missed while washing dishes for people who couldn't be bothered to include me in their adventures. Each island we passed looked like promises kept to myself, emerald dots in an ocean that didn't care about my last name or birth order. The Waldorf Astoria materialized from the ocean like a fevered dream of luxury made manifest. Staff lined the jetty to welcome me, their greetings more genuine than any family gathering I'd attended. "Ms. Montgomery, we've been expecting you," the manager said, as if I'd always belonged in places that expected me rather than tolerated my presence. My butler, Aziz, appeared with cold towels and fresh juice, explaining features of a villa that cost more per night than my family had spent including me in 34 years. The overwater bungalow defied every limitation I'd internalized about what I deserved. Glass floor panels revealed an ocean teeming with life that moved freely without worrying about invitation lists. An infinity pool merged with the horizon, creating the illusion that I could swim to the edge of the world and beyond my family's reach. The bed faced east for sunrise viewing, though I'd also enjoy sunsets from the deck where a table for one had been set with flowers and champagne, celebrating a guest list that finally reflected my worth. By evening Maldivian time, the family meltdown had reached critical mass. 47 missed calls created a symphony of rejection in my silenced phone. I poured a glass of wine that cost more than bottles my family bought for entire gatherings and opened the message thread with anthropological detachment. Their stages of grief played out in real time: denial that I'd actually left, anger at my selfishness, bargaining for my location, depression about Thanksgiving's ruin, and absolutely no sign of acceptance approaching. The sun set on my first day of freedom with colors that belonged in museums rather than above oceans where middle children learned to swim alone. I posted a photo of my feet up on the deck railing, silhouetted against a sky that had turned the water into liquid gold. The caption came easily this time: "Thanksgiving came early this year." Grateful for horizons without limits, oceans without obligations, and discovering that family is about choice, not chromosomes. Then I turned off my phone entirely, letting their crisis unfold without my participation while waves lapped against my villa like applause for the best performance of my life. Day 3 in paradise arrived with a gentleness my family had never mastered. Breakfast appeared on my deck via silent boat service, the staff understanding privacy in ways blood relatives never had. I'd grown confident enough to check my phone by then, discovering that the Montgomery family had progressed from confusion through rage into full-blown campaign mode. The latest salvo came from my mother, who'd apparently appointed herself spokesperson for collective devastation. Her message, sent at what would have been 3 a.m. her time, reeked of desperation masquerading as authority. "Your father is having chest pains from the stress you've caused," she wrote, deploying the nuclear option of parental health manipulation. I might have fallen for it once, but Serena had forwarded me his Facebook post from that same evening, showing him at their country club's poker night looking remarkably healthy for a man whose daughter had given him cardiac distress. The photo showed him laughing over cards and whiskey, probably celebrating not having to pretend to enjoy my stuffing this year. I screenshot both her message and his post, saving them in a folder I'd labeled "Evidence for Dr. Coleman," though really they were evidence for myself. My mother's next attempt came with photographic ammunition, an image of their empty dining room table, chairs arranged around nothing like mourners at a wake for family dysfunction. "This is what Thanksgiving looks like without you," she captioned it, apparently missing the irony that their Hawaiian vacation had looked exactly like that from my perspective. I responded with my own photo from the previous evening's private beach dinner, a table set for one with more care than they'd ever shown setting a place for me. "This is what Thanksgiving looks like when you choose yourself," I wrote back, then blocked her number before she could escalate further. Drake took over negotiations on day 4, bringing his business degree and emotional ignorance to bear on the situation. "You've made your point," his message began, as if my self-care was merely performance art requiring an audience. "Now it's time to grow up and come home. We'll forget this happened if you can make it back by Thursday." The generosity of his offer to forget my empowerment might have been touching if it hadn't been wrapped in the same dismissive tone he'd used when explaining why there wasn't room for me in Hawaii despite 6 empty bedrooms. I was floating in my private pool when his threats began arriving with the regularity of tide changes. "You'll regret this when you're alone at Christmas," he promised, apparently forgetting that being alone by choice felt different from being excluded by design. "Don't expect us to include you in anything after this stunt," came next, which might have stung if inclusion had ever been their strong suit. The final message achieved peak irony: "Family is forever, Moana. You can't just walk away from blood." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my waterproof phone, wondering if he remembered typing similar words when he literally walked away to Cancun without inviting his blood sister to his wedding. Day 5 brought what my family considered their secret weapon: Autumn's tears. She called repeatedly until I finally answered, her sobs immediate and theatrical. "My boyfriend's family came for Thanksgiving, and there was no dinner," she wailed, as if I'd personally stolen food from their mouths rather than simply declined to provide it. "His parents think we're trash now. You've ruined my relationship." The accusation might have carried weight if her relationship hadn't been built on the same shallow foundation as our family bonds, crumbling at the first sign of inconvenience. "You could have ordered catering," I suggested, voice steady despite her escalating hysteria. "You could have made reservations. You could have learned to cook sometime in the past 28 years. You had options that didn't involve me serving you." The silence that followed felt like victory until she played her final card. "Grandma would be so disappointed in you." The cruelty of invoking our grandmother, the only family member who'd seen my worth, sparked anger that surprised me with its heat. "Grandma left me money specifically so I could stop being the family servant," I shot back. "She'd be buying drinks at this swim-up bar if she were still alive." The attempted guilt trips evolved into recruitment of extended family, a Montgomery tradition of weaponizing relatives who normally couldn't remember my birthday. Cousin Janet called on day 6, her voice dripping with false concern. "Everyone's worried about you, dear," she cooed, despite not having spoken to me since last Christmas when she'd needed a ride from the airport. "This isn't like you at all." I wanted to tell her she was right, that this wasn't like the old me who would have been elbow-deep in turkey preparation while everyone else relaxed. Instead, I sent her a photo of myself swimming with tropical fish who included me in their school without questioning my right to be there. Uncle Peter's voicemail achieved remarkable efficiency in its judgment. "Selfish little girl ruining everyone's holiday," he slurred, apparently day drinking his way through the family crisis. His message continued for 3 minutes of increasingly creative insults that might have hurt if I hadn't been receiving them, while a therapist-recommended meditation app guided me through breathing exercises on a beach that looked like screensavers. I saved his message too, adding it to my collection of reasons this trip had been necessary for survival rather than revenge. Day 7 brought unexpected allies along with continued attacks. Aunt Isabel, my mother's sister who'd been mysteriously absent from family gatherings for the past 5 years, sent a private message that explained her own disappearance. "They did the same to me," she wrote, attaching photos of family vacations she'd discovered through social media rather than invitations. "Got tired of cooking for people who couldn't remember to include me when the meals were restaurants instead of my kitchen. Proud of you for breaking free." Her support felt like finding a life raft in an ocean of criticism, proof that I wasn't crazy for expecting basic reciprocity from blood relatives. The family narrative began shifting by day 8, morphing from anger to revisionist history. My mother posted on Facebook about when children hurt their parents, with carefully edited stories that omitted decades of exclusion. Drake shared articles about narcissism in millennials, apparently unaware that posting beach photos while your sister cooked unpaid meals might qualify. Autumn launched a TikTok series about toxic siblings who abandon family, each video gaining fewer views than photos of my breakfast fruit arrangements. Their public performance of victimhood might have worked if relatives hadn't started sharing their own stories of Montgomery family exclusion in the comments. My father's intervention came late, but loaded with the particular cruelty of paternal disappointment. "You've destroyed your mother," he informed me via voice message, his tone suggesting I'd committed murder rather than vacation. "She hasn't stopped crying since Thanksgiving." I wondered if she'd cried when booking Hawaiian flights without me, but kept that observation for my journal instead of his voicemail. His message continued with predictions about my future loneliness, the family events I'd miss, the regret that would surely consume me once this tantrum ended. By day 9, the truth had started emerging through cracks in their unified front. Screenshots leaked from their private group chat, forwarded by cousins who'd grown tired of the drama. "At least we don't have to pretend her food is good this Christmas," Autumn had typed, followed by laughing emojis from Drake. "Maybe we can finally have a real vacation without worrying about her feelings," my mother had added, apparently forgetting that their previous vacations hadn't involved much worry about my feelings anyway. The messages continued, each one revealing how little they'd valued my presence beyond service provided. The final confrontation came through Drake's wife, deployed as a last resort when direct attacks failed. "You're breaking Drake's heart," she messaged, adding sad emojis for emphasis. "He keeps saying he should have been a better brother." The manipulation might have worked if I hadn't remembered her laughing about my exclusion from their wedding in a video Autumn had accidentally included me on. "Tell Drake he's had 34 years to be a better brother," I replied. "One of those years included a wedding where he found room for your college roommate, but not his sister. His heart seems pretty resilient to me." As my final days in paradise wound down, the family messages took on a different tone. Bargaining crept in between threats, offering future inclusion if I'd just apologize for making them face consequences. "We'll plan a family trip for next summer," my mother promised, as if future breadcrumbs could compensate for decades of starvation. "You can pick the destination," she added, apparently missing that I'd already picked a destination, and it was magnificent specifically because they weren't there. Their promises felt hollow as coconut shells, pretty on the outside, but empty where substance should live. The last message I read before my return flight came from my father, uncharacteristically vulnerable in the early morning hours. "I don't understand what we did wrong," he wrote, and for a moment I almost felt sympathy. Then I remembered every milestone celebrated without me, every achievement dismissed, every exclusion explained away with logic that only made sense if you'd already decided I didn't matter. Understanding required acknowledgement, and acknowledgement required seeing me as more than the family appliance that cooked holiday meals. His confusion was genuine, which made it worse. They truly didn't understand what they'd done wrong because they'd never considered I deserved right. #Part 8. Conclusion and transformation. The Maldivian sunrise on my last morning painted the ocean in shades of possibility I'd never seen from my apartment window. I sat on my villa's deck with coffee that cost more than grocery store brands my family bought, watching the water wake up with grace they'd never shown me at any hour. The meditation app guided me through reflection on transformation, though I hardly needed electronic assistance to recognize how profoundly I'd changed. 10 days of choosing myself had rewired 3 decades of programming that said my worth lay in serving others who wouldn't serve me back. Aziz appeared with breakfast and a knowing smile that had deepened over our daily interactions. "You look different than when you arrived, Ms. Montgomery," he observed, arranging tropical fruits with the same care I'd once reserved for family dinners. "Happier. More yourself." His simple assessment carried more truth than any family therapy session we'd never attended. I had become more myself by traveling thousands of miles from people who'd convinced me that myself wasn't enough unless it came with side dishes and unconditional availability. The journal I'd filled during quiet mornings contained revelations that Dr. Coleman would call breakthroughs, but felt more like remembering. I wrote about the child who'd pressed her face against car windows while her family drove away, the teenager who'd learned to cook elaborate meals as currency for belonging that was never quite accepted, the adult who'd confused being needed with being loved, who'd built an identity around reliability because at least servants got invited inside, even if they ate in different rooms. Each page documented not just pain, but the peculiar freedom that comes from finally naming wounds instead of covering them with holiday decorations. Packing felt different from the frantic preparation 10 days earlier. Each designer dress folded with deliberation, every souvenir chosen for myself rather than guilt offerings for people who wouldn't appreciate them anyway. The turtle carved from local stone would sit on my desk, reminding me that carrying your home on your back meant you could find shelter anywhere, even in oceans where your family refused to swim. The hand-woven basket would hold keys to an apartment that no longer felt like a way station between family obligations, but an actual home where I was always welcome. The seaplane ride back to Malé offered perspective both literal and metaphorical. From above, the islands looked like scattered thoughts finally organized into coherent sentences. Each atoll represented boundaries I'd learned to build, coral reefs protecting soft centers from predators who shared DNA, but not empathy. I filmed the journey with steady hands, no longer shaking from confrontation or conflict. The camera captured a woman returning from more than vacation, documenting evidence of evolution in real time. Immigration at home felt like re-entering a world I'd left as one person and returned to as another. The officer stamped my passport with the same indifference as always, unaware she was processing the documents of someone who'd finally emigrated from toxic family dynamics even if geography remained unchanged. My phone exploded with notifications as soon as I switched off airplane mode, but the messages felt like echoes from another lifetime where their opinions mattered more than my own peace. The apartment welcomed me with silence that felt friendly rather than lonely. Plants thrived under Serena's care, surfaces remained clean without constant cooking, spaces existed without the weight of hosting people who wouldn't host me back. I unpacked slowly, integrating vacation clothes with everyday wear because the person who deserved luxury travel also deserved respect on random Tuesdays. The designer swimsuit would wait for future trips I'd already started researching, destinations chosen for joy rather than escape. Sarah noticed the change immediately when I returned to work, commenting on something she called vacation glow, but felt more permanent than any tan. "You look like someone who figured something out," she said during our morning meeting, and I nodded because explaining would have taken longer than our scheduled hour. The promotion I'd earned meant I could afford more than just trips. It funded the life I was building where success wasn't measured in family approval but personal satisfaction. Dr. Coleman leaned forward during our first session back, abandoning professional distance for genuine curiosity. "Tell me about the water," she said, somehow knowing that healing had happened in ocean moments between structured activities. I described floating alone without loneliness, swimming with creatures who included me instinctively, sitting with sunset views that belonged to me as much as anyone. "You learned you deserve beauty," she summarized, and I cried then because someone finally articulated what my family had spent decades denying. The blog started almost accidentally, thoughts spilling onto screen faster than fingers could type. Choosing yourself after childhood scapegoating felt pretentious until the first comment arrived from someone who'd spent last Christmas alone after similar exclusions. Messages poured in from middle children, black sheep, reliable ones who'd confused service with love until breaking points that looked like plane tickets to places their families would never follow. Each story validated mine while building community from shared survival rather than shared blood. Some relatives reached out with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Aunt Isabel became regular coffee companion, our conversations weaving through parallel experiences of Montgomery marginalization. Cousins admitted they'd noticed the exclusion, but hadn't known how to address it without becoming targets themselves. These connections felt different, built on honesty rather than obligation, seasoned with mutual respect rather than hierarchy. We were forming new family from old materials, recycling dysfunction into something sustainable. My parents attempted reconciliation with the same half measures that had characterized their parenting. Lunch invitations came with conditions about moving past this nonsense, as if my self-respect was phase rather than permanent installation. I responded with my own conditions: therapy, acknowledgement, and genuine change rather than promises to include me in hypothetical future vacations. Their silence spoke louder than any argument, confirming that their love came with terms I could no longer accept. Christmas approached with invitations to other tables where I'd be guest rather than staff. Serena's family welcomed me into celebrations where no one expected me to cook unless I wanted to share rather than serve. Work friends planned potlucks where everyone contributed equally and ate together at the same table. The holiday I dreaded became opportunity to experience what family felt like when it wasn't assigned by birth order, but chosen through affinity. Japan beckoned for New Year's, a destination selected because my family had never mentioned wanting to go there. I booked flights with confidence born from practice, choosing experiences based on desire rather than defiance. The solo travel that had terrified me in November now felt like a natural extension of self-care that wasn't selfish but necessary. Each reservation made proclaimed that Moana Montgomery was worth celebrating whether anyone else showed up or not. The transformation wasn't just about travel, but daily decisions that honored my worth regardless of witnesses. Cooking became joy rather than currency when I prepared meals for friends who reciprocated with their own offerings. Holidays transformed from obligations into options where my presence was requested rather than required. The family I was building included people who noticed my absence and celebrated my presence, who understood that love meant inclusion especially when resources were limited, not just when convenience allowed. Looking back at photos from the Maldives, I barely recognized the woman who'd boarded that first flight fueled by pain and possibilities. She looked like someone I'd want to befriend, radiating confidence that came from choosing herself after a lifetime of being chosen last or not at all. The sunset images captured more than beautiful views. They documented the moment someone decided their worth wasn't negotiable, that family meant more than blood, and that sometimes the best seat at the table is the one you set for yourself at restaurants where everyone is welcome, but no one is obligated to attend. So now I ask you, wherever you're watching from, have you ever felt excluded by the people who should love you most? Have you confused being needed with being valued, service with belonging? Share your stories in the comments below because healing happens in community, even digital ones. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself when others won't choose you. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they deserve their own private island, even if it's just a boundary drawn in sand. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is show them what they're missing. The table you set for yourself will always have exactly enough seats for everyone who truly deserves to be there.